Thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. My name is Mieko, for those I have not met before. I'm the Member Services Librarian for Public Services here at CCS. And today we are doing Simply Statistics, creating statistical reports in Simply Reports. So today's session is named Simply Statistics for a couple reasons. First, and probably most obviously, because we are working in Simply Reports, which is the Polaris Reports application. Second, this is going to be a very beginner look at using Simply Reports statistical reports. So I'm approaching stat reports in that everyone's kind of starting off with a very baseline knowledge here. And then third, I'm calling the session Simply Statistics because honestly, we're kind of limited in what we can get from Simply Reports. So these stats tend to be pretty basic or high level stats. But these numbers can still be helpful and still give you some insight into your library and your data. So my goal for today is to give you a baseline knowledge of how to run a statistical report in Simply and help you get an idea of what kind of information you're able to get from these stat reports. And we'll use some demos to show you what we've got here. And then finally, I'm also going to show you how to save, schedule, and retrieve a statistical report. Like all of our sessions, this one is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you and will be posted online if you want to rewatch at a later date. So here is today's agenda. Our demos today are going to be focused on checkout data. And this is so we can see how the different reports and report options can be used within the context of the same kind of report. And again, like I said, I'm going to show you how to set up a report to run off hours. Now, before we start looking at building reports or demoing anything, I just want to take a moment to just kind of like define and bring up some important points about these statistical reports. So I'm assuming that those who are attending today's session have some level of familiarity with at least list reports or count reports and Simply reports. But what you're going to see today is that statistical reports are a little different than list and count reports. And this is because list and count reports look at our data as it exists. So if you run a list report of items with a circulation status of missing, it's going to give you a list of items that at this moment have a circulation status of missing. Like it's not going to list items that were missing last month, but then found, right? If you run a count report of patrons who registered in, say, September 2019, it's only going to count users who are currently in our database. So if a patron record was deleted, at this time, it no longer exists in our database, and as a result, cannot be counted in the report. Statistical reports, on the other hand, look at historical data. So these reports look at the number of times a certain action occurred within our reporting time frame. So while that count report of patron registrations can only count patrons who still exist in our database, a statistical report, since it's historical data, can return the number of patrons registered within that time frame, whether or not those patrons have since been deleted. So again, it's looking at what actions occurred during our reporting time frame. I also want to touch on staff access here. So if you're attending today or if you're watching the recording, I'm betting most, if not all of you, are able to access Simply reports, right? You're able to log in, you've run list reports or count reports before, but each report mode in Simply is permission-based. So you may have permissions to run an item list report, but you may not yet have permissions to run an item statistical report. So the next time you log into Simply Reports, if you don't see the option to run a category statistical report, this just means you don't yet have permission to access this module. So thankfully, it's really easy to update your permissions. To update your Simply Reports permissions, just open a help desk ticket or email help@ccslib.org. Specify you're interested in running stat reports, and we can help you get set up with that. And then the last thing I want to mention before we jump into like building our reports. So if you're new to Simply Reports, stat reports, one thing to know is that stat reports take up more resources than running a list report or account report, right? So a very large stat report has the potential to tie up a large amount of resources. When we first migrated to Polaris back in 2018, this was something that our vendor, Innovative, advised us to be careful about. So when you're running a stat report, it will by default not run immediately, but instead prompt you to save it so you can schedule it to run later during off hours. Now, near the end of today's session, we're going to take a look at how to schedule and retrieve those reports. However, when you're in there, when you're building the report, you will see a checkbox that allows you to run a statistical report immediately. And now that we've had a few years to kind of get a feel for these stat reports, my recommended guideline is that if you're running stats covering a 3-month period or less, that's going to be like a small to moderately sized report. So you shouldn't have any problems when running the report now. I'd say it's okay to click that checkbox and run the report now. If your report is going to cover more than 3 months, my recommendation is to save that report to run later. Our take with these reports is that it's better safe than sorry. Today, our reports are going to cover at most 5 weeks of data. So we're going to use Run Now, and that way we can look at the run reports together. So that's just a little bit of introduction into stat reports. I'm going to jump into Simply Reports now. I have several example reports that we're going to run together today. These are all going to be variations on a checkout statistics report. And this is to help us become familiar with what kind of statistical data that we can get from Simply Reports and see how the different report build options work together. So for today, we're going to work in the Items tab under the Item Statistical Reports subcategory. This area is going to look different than what you're used to seeing with your other types of reports, with those list reports and count reports. First thing you'll probably notice is that there's no output options here. And this highlights one of the major differences between a statistical report and those other reports. So stat reports, they're going to tell you how many times a certain thing happened. It's not going to tell you what records were involved. So for example here, we're going to be running checkout reports. Our reports are going to tell us how many checkouts occurred within our date range, but the reports is not going to give us a list of each item record that was checked out. I hope that made sense. Another difference that you will see when you're in here, and I'm just going to scroll down and expand this filters section. You'll notice that these filters are locked down. So all these filter options are currently grayed out, and I'm unable to select any of them. Filters and stat reports are going to be very limited, and they're also going to be dependent on what you select here at the top of the page. So let me show you. One of the options up here is a subcategory, and this is just how you want to like categorize your stats. Depending on what I may select as a report subcategory, I may then be able to access a filter. For example, if I wanted to organize or sort my statistics by item material type, now that I've selected that as a subcategory, you'll find that I'm now able to use the material type filter. For example, like if I wanted to focus on just certain material types in my report. However, all of the other filters are locked down. I still can't select them. And this is just how, because of how my report is built and how Simply Reports generates statistical data. So, at the very beginning of the session, I said the webinar is named Simply Statistics because we're kind of limited in what stats we can get from Simply Reports. And this is an example of what I mean here. So we can look at check in or check out statistics organized material type, but we can't then layer on an additional filter such as, item shelf location or item statistical class. So I'm just going to deselect my filter and come back up here. We're going to start today with a very, very basic statistical report just to help us understand how to get started building one and give us a baseline knowledge of how these reports look. Now, I've included the report setups for each of our example reports in a handout that I sent with the session reminder this morning. I'll also resend it with the wrap up too. So you hopefully will have all of the builds in the handout, so you don't feel like you have to take frantic notes to record everything we're doing here. For our first example, we want the number of checkouts at or through our library from last week. So based on this prompt, we know we're going to run a statistical report because we're looking for historical data. We're asking, how many times did a thing happen in the past? And for this first report, we want to know how many checkouts occurred at or through our library last week. Now, as you're getting started with Simply Reports, you may find that you need to go through the different tabs and just check to see which has the action you want to focus on and which has the subcategories that you want to use. And that's totally normal as you're getting used to what's available. For all of our reports today, we're just going to stick with these item statistical reports. To build this type of report, I like to work from the top down. The very first set of report options up here, the statistical reports section, this is where we determine the basics of what the report is looking at and how it's going to sort or categorize our statistics. So this very first field we have is statistical categories. And this is where we tell the report what action we're focusing on. So for items, that could be checkouts, check-ins, item records created or modified, and more. For this example report, we're doing a report on checkouts. So that is what I will set the statistical category to. The next option here, available subcategories. This option allows you to categorize your report results. So let me expand this. So here I could choose a subcategory of shelf location, and the report will then sort our checkout statistics based on the item record's shelf location. So let's say we had 7,000 checkouts during our reporting period. The report's going to tell us that 1,000 of those checkouts were items with a shelf location of adult fiction, 500 were items with a shelf location of kids AV, right? That sort of thing. For this first example, we're going to keep it basic. So I'm not going to subcategorize. I'm just going to leave it as activity summary. And that just means the report's going to give us just one overall number for checkouts. The next thing to look at is report type. And this allows us to divide the report number based on a division of time. We see we've got daily, hourly, and then even like day of week by hour. So I could set our report type to daily, and then the report's going to divvy up the numbers based on the calendar day. So again, if there were 7,000 checkouts total that week, you've got 1,000 on the 16th, 1,500 on the 17th, and so on. Related to report type is the detail level. This field is going to auto adjust based on what you selected for report type. So you see here, I've left report type right now to general summary. So I don't have a detail level option. But if I choose a different report type like daily, detail level will auto adjust to available options for me. So I could choose day, month and day, year, month and day. We're going to see both report type and detail level in later examples. So I'm just going to pass over these for now and keep them at the general summary for our first example. Okay, after those basic options, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. We next have this section of report focus. And this is where we establish the where and the when for our report. One option I believe will always be available no matter what type of stat report you want. And one I suspect most of you would be interested in using is this library quick pick or transacting branch option. So this focuses the report to statistics from a certain library or set of libraries. If I don't select an option here, the report is going to generate statistics for all libraries. For our reports today, we're just going to do checkout stats from a single location. And so I'm going to select my location from that list. For our demo today, I'm going to say I work at Des Plaines Public Library and choose that from our quick pick. Below that, you'll see there's also lists of staff usernames and workstations. By default, these are going to be grayed out. So again, these are more fields that activate based on how we configure report. These lists are tied to the set of buttons right under the report focus heading. By default, our report focus is going to run the report by transacting organization only. And this just sorts our report statistics based on where the action was performed. If I was running checkout stats for all CCS libraries, this means the report is going to sort my results by where the checkout occurred. I'll get a number for Algonquin, a number for Cary, and so on. You'll see there's also buttons to include transacting user detail or workstation detail. Transacting user detail relates to which staff member performed the action. And you'll see if I select this button, my report, first of all, my report is going to sort my results by staff username, right? My report will then show how many checkouts I did, how many checkouts my coworker Virginia did, how many my coworker Kathleen did. Additionally, now that I selected the option to include this transacting user detail, I now have the option to focus my report to a specific user or set of users using this list of staff usernames. So if I just wanted to see stats for my own username, I could select it from this list, run the report, and then I could see how many checkouts I individually did. And then similarly, we have a button labeled Include Transacting Workstation Detail. You've probably picked up on the pattern by now, but this is going to sort my report results by workstation. So if I have 3 circulation workstations, I could see how many checkouts workstation 1 did versus 2 versus 3. I would say this report focus could be helpful if you have like different service points at your library and are trying to assess volume at each one. And then also, just like the users, by selecting this button, I now have the option to select specific workstations from that list. So for our reports today, I say we want to keep our report focused to run report by transacting organization only. So again, we're just going to sort our results by branch. We don't care about looking at staff details or workstation details. And then the final thing we're going to set up for our report is our report date coverage. We have the option of gathering statistics over a specific date range, or we can run the report using a relative date. For those who may not be familiar with the term, a relative date means that we can tell the report to gather stats from a certain number of days ago through today. So if I say run it for the past 3 days, it's going to include checkouts from the 23rd, the 24th, and the 25th. And you'll see here, it also specifies that it's going to include the report run date. So it will include checkouts through, what time is it? 2:23 p.m. on the 26th. Our report, this one's going to cover last week. So I'm going to use this specific date range and select January 16th with an end date of January 22nd. So let me input those days. Now again, like we said earlier, by default, Simply Report statistical reports are not going to run immediately. They're going to save the reports can be scheduled to run during off hours. For training today, and since we're running a report over a really short period of time, it's not going to take many resources for us to run these. So I am going to select the option to run the report now. And now, whenever you click this option, Simply Reports is going to throw up an alert, just reminding you that a large report can potentially have a negative impact. I say this is a great opportunity just to make sure that your reporting date range is correct and that you're scoping statistics to the proper library. If all looks good, click OK. And our report is now set up to run immediately. So let's click Submit. We can see our first report results here. So over the course of that week, January 16th through the 22nd, Displays did 13,549 checkouts. So this is what our report output looks like because we opted to run the report by transacting organization only. So it's giving us the statistics based on which branch they occurred at. And additionally, since we did not use one of those subcategories, we're just kind of seeing a general summary. So we just have a general summary of checkouts here. Let's talk, I'm going to flip back to my slides real quickly because I just want to talk about these results just for a moment. Now, sometimes, I've gotten this question every so often, sometimes you have an equivalent report in web reports, which is the CCS report repository, but the web report numbers and the Simply report numbers may not totally match up. So if we were to run a checkout report in Simply just for a single day and compare that to like the daily checkout and renewal report from web reports, those numbers might look a little different. And here's why. First of all, Simply Reports is counting all types of users, whereas web reports can exclude activity from things like test user accounts, which both CCS and libraries can use in training. And maybe depending on the web report, it can also exclude in-house cards, which are things like your tech services department cards. And then like if we're talking checkouts like we're looking at today, Simply Reports is including things like auto renewals in the number, and it's also including some e-content checkouts. Whereas web reports can separate checkouts from renewal. It also does not, web reports also does not count e-content checkouts because the ILS system does not count them in full. And we're going to get more into that during our next example. Okay, so we're back here. I'm just going to close this first report preview. For our next example, I want to show you what applying a subcategory does for your report. So we're going to run a report that gives us statistics by checkout type. Our report set up from this first example, it's all still here. We're going checkout statistics from Des Plaines Public Library between January 16th through the 22nd. And then for our first example, we did not subcategorize our results in any kind of way. Since we're working with item reports, these are the options we have available to us for subcategorizing our results. We can get this number categorized by item material type, and then our report will tell us like how many of these checkouts were for book new items, how many for book hot items, and how many just for that regular old book material type. The subcategory I want to highlight in our second example is checkout type. So when looking at the results of our first report, I mentioned how that number includes checkouts and renewals and some integrated e-content checkouts. Using the subcategory of checkout types is going to break down our report result based on what category of checkout it is. So with this subcategory, we can take the data and we can see how many checkouts were done by staff at the desk, how many were self-check checkouts, and how many were auto renewals. So I'm just going to double check my values again, just to make sure everything's great. We're doing checkout, categorized by checkout type. Got my branch in here and my date range, and run now is still selected. So our report is set up. Let's submit this so we can take a look at our subcategory. So here's the results. With this report set up, I have a better idea of activity over that week at the checkout desk, which would be leap checkout and renewal. Oops, sorry, leap checkout and renewal right there. I can see activity at our self-checks. And I can see how many of these checkouts were because of the daily auto renewal. I really quickly want to draw your attention to these third-party checkout entries and third-party renewal, as well as the Power Pack checkout entry. Because these three entries relate to e-content. So let's go back to our slides ever so briefly. Oops. So I did include a slide that explains what the most common checkout types are. And I just want to give a little heads up here about those e-content checkouts and simpler reports. So in our results, we saw that we had some e-content checkouts represented. And here's how Polaris defines them. So Polaris can only categorize e-content checkouts based on how the user authenticates. So we'll see here, Power Pack checkout are e-content checkouts that are authenticate from services that authenticate through SIP. So that means these checkouts could have occurred in the online catalog, or they could have occurred in Overdrive because Overdrive authenticates through SIP. The third-party checkout and the third-party renewals, these are related to transactions that have been authenticated through API. So those are things like Cloud Library. Now, we encourage libraries to use statistics from your e-content vendors for accuracy. The e-content checkout numbers you get from Polaris are likely going to be lower than the numbers you get from your vendors. And this is due to how frequently some vendors will make a call to Polaris to authenticate. So for example, if the patron is using the Libby app, Overdrive does not make a call to Polaris every time the patron performs an activity in the app, which means Polaris is not able to record every transaction the patron does in the app. So because of that, the numbers Polaris shows will be different than the numbers that like Overdrive will give you. So moral of the story with this example, Simply Reports stat reports can be really helpful for getting activity related to physical materials. So the activity at your service desk, activity the self-checks, but they're not 100% accurate in reporting for e-content activity. So I always like to emphasize, please refer to your vendors for those e-content statistics. Okay, I'm just going to pause here, see if there's any questions before we move on to our next couple demos. Okay, so we're going to move on to our last two report examples. And for these examples, I want to show you how using these report type options. Oh, I do have a chat. Hang on for just a second. Oh, do you know how many checkouts through a library app would appear? So again, this is going to be based on how the app authenticates. So I know a lot of libraries use Communico. Off the top of my head, I don't recall how Communico authenticates. I'm trying to remember some of the other library apps that are out there. Um, let me see what I can find out about Communico at least, and I'll send that out to the group because I know I have that information about how Communico authenticates stored somewhere. Ah, excellent. And then another question, can we go over again why when you do a date range search versus a relative date search? What is the difference? So a date range search allows you to set a specific start date and end date for your report. So our report specifically looking for data between the 16th and the 22nd. A relative date allows you to define a period of time leading up to the report date. So if I say I want to do a relative date range of 3 days ago and the report date, it's going to give me 3 days ago plus today. Relative dates, I would say relative dates are incredibly helpful if you're going to save and schedule a report to run on a regular basis. So if you're building a report that you know you want to run like every week, you'll definitely want to use a relative date range. So that way, each time that report runs, you're with up-to-date information. I hope that answered the question. If not, throw a chat up. Awesome, good. So I want to look at how this report type and detail level can come into play here. So for this next demo, I'm just going to set our subcategory back to activity summary so we can focus on how report type and detail level impact our data. So again, the report type allows us to divide the report number based on time. And with this menu expanded, you can see how we view our statistics, like we can do it by month, by day. and more. So we're going to run this report a couple different times so we can see how the report type changes how we view our statistics. For this first example, I'm going to run a daily report. So keep in mind, our report date range covers the 16th to the 22nd. And if you remember from earlier in the session, I said that detail level is related to report type. So now we have the option to set day, month, day, year, month, day. I'm going to keep it at day. And I'm going to show you what it does and what one of the other details level does at the next demo. So we've got our checkout for displays for that week. And we have a report type set to daily. Let's run this and see what we have. So this is what we get. It divides our statistics up by calendar day. So you've got checkouts from January 16th over here under day 16. Checkouts from January 22nd are here under 22. So I want to show you something with this. I'm going to go back to our report setup, and I'm going to change our report date range so it starts a month earlier. So we're going to start December 16th and end on January 22nd. And keep in mind, we're still doing this report type daily and detail level of day. So let's submit this. Now we have output for day 1 through day 31, but our date range covers more than 31 days. So what Simply Reports is doing here, because our detail level is just set to day, it's giving us the numbers based on the day of the month. And that means the statistic for December 16th and January 16th is both bundled here under day 16. So this is really important to keep in mind if your date range is going to span multiple months. So let's go back. You know, this detail level here, it's not going to work for our example. So let's choose another one. I'm going to change this detail level to month and day, and then run the report again. This time, our detail level considers both the month and the day in our output. So we have the December 16th statistic and the January 16th statistic broken apart. So in summary here, when you are considering a report type, think about your report date range and use that to figure out what detail level is going to help you out. Okay, let's go back to the report, and I'm going to set our date range back to January 16th here. So we're back to our week. And I want to show you one other report setup that could be kind of cool using report type. And that is this day of week by hour. So this report type doesn't have any detail levels available, so there's nothing to select here. So I just have my report type set to day of week by hour, and let me submit our report. With this type of report, we get a breakout of our checkout statistics by hour. Now, keep in mind our report date range, excuse me, is only a week. So each one of these numbers represents a single hour of checkouts. You'll notice by default, the report is sorted alphabetically by day, which is why we have Friday listed first instead of Monday. So, you know, you might want to download this, do some Excel magic to get things in calendar order. But I find this type of report interesting because it can help you gauge like what hours of your week are like the busiest for checkouts, which ones are a little quieter. And one thing I just want to point out here too, if you've noticed, I know we only have Friday and Monday up here, but you may have noticed that like there's a lot of activity between 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day, but the libraries aren't open at that time. So 3 guesses to anyone, what's prompting the activity here? It's our auto renewal hour. Yep, you got it, Bridget. Um, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. is the auto renewal hour. So if it's one thing where you want to like say, don't want to consider, I want to look at checkouts for a day, I'm not considering auto renewals, just subtract that number. So this is always interesting to see, but we can take this one step further. I'm going to go back to our report setup, and I'm going to layer on a subcategory. We haven't done this before, but I'm going to layer on a subcategory along with a report type. And it looks like our simple reports reset here. So I'm just going to set everything back up. So I'm going to look at statistical category of checkout type. We'll do our day of week by hour. And let me go back to selecting our branch and our start and end date range. Of course, we're going to run the report now. Okay, so we've got not only a report type layered on, but also a subcategory, and I am going to submit the report. So now we have a report that's first going to separate our statistics by checkout type, and then it's going to subdivide by day of the week and hour of the day. So here we've got all of our auto renewals that run between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. every day. But I can also look at the lead checkouts. All right, and these are checkouts that occur at the service desk. And I can see like our busiest hour at the desk is on Friday. Or downloading the report, I can see like at our self-checks, what's the busiest hour for our self-checks. So again, our report's just looking at a week's worth of data. But if I consider this report regularly, I can maybe pick up on some patterns and say like, hey, this hour is consistently the busiest day at our self-checks. Let's make it a goal to refill displays nearby before that daily rush. So using those report subcategories and those report types together in different ways can help you visualize your data differently and give you some helpful insights. So the final thing I want to show you is how to save a report and set it up to run during off hours. So this is what you'll do if you have a larger report that you want, but you don't want to run it now. The steps are written out in the handout, and we're going to walk through them. So in order to set up a demo, I am just going to take my report and deselect the Run Report Now checkbox. If you don't have that Run Now selected, when you submit, instead of any numbers, you're just going to see the option to save the report parameters for later use. So to save it, we'll select the checkbox for that save option, and then we'll give our report a name. Report names do need to be unique throughout the entire system. We have a lot of people running reports. So in order to keep things unique, we recommend using your library's 3-letter code and your initials in the report title, just to kind of one extra layer to differentiate between the reports. So let's see, simply stats example. Optionally, you can enter a brief report description. And then whenever you're ready to save, all you need to do is click the little save icon to save report parameters. So this report is now part of your saved reports. You can locate your saved reports. Let me go back here. Saved reports can be found in the My Reports tab. And then you have a list here of all the different types of reports that you can run. So you want to select what type of report it is. So in our case today, we just ran and saved an item statistical report, and that is what we will look for and select from the list. And then you should see your report example down here in the list. Now, usually with saved reports, you can run them on demand by selecting the checkbox and clicking Run Report. Unfortunately, as we see here, this is not the case with statistical reports. So with stat reports, you will need to schedule it to run during off hours. So let me go back just to my reports. I'm going to reselect statistical reports there, and let's get to scheduling. We do have, again, full step-by-step in your handout. There's also step-by-step on our website on how to schedule a report. Let's start here. So I've selected my report setup, and I'm going to click Schedule Reports. And so again, just a few options you need to fill out. You do need to give your schedule a name. This one doesn't have to be unique. So I'm just going to say simply statistics schedule. You can optionally give it a description. And then you can set a start date and an expiration date. If this is going to be one of those reports that you run more than once, if you want to run it like weekly or monthly, you can say, I want it to start. This is going to be like reports I'm going to do in the second half of the year. So it's going to start July 1st and it's going to end December 31st. If it's just like a one-time deal, if you're not working ahead, you can just leave the schedule start date to today. And then down here, you'll see all of the schedule options. So you've got that option to run just one time, or again, those options to run weekly, monthly, daily, if this is a report that you're gonna want to run on a regular basis. And again, just wanna emphasize, if you're running a report on a regular basis, don't forget to check that any dates you choose are those relative dates. Otherwise, you're just gonna keep getting that same data over and over and over again. So for today, we are just going to run our report once. So I'm going to select that checkbox, and you'll select expand the calendar to choose what day you want the report to run. I'm going to say I want it to run tomorrow overnight. So I'll select that date from the calendar. And then I can choose what time I want to schedule it to run. Selections are built so you only have the option to run during off hours. So it doesn't bump into any other like big reporting jobs that are happening. So I always like to choose sometime in the middle of the night or late at night. So this time I'm going to choose 2 a.m. And then all you have to do to finish scheduling is just save your schedule. So the report then will run at the date and the time you specified. Once it's finished running, you will still need to come into Simpler Reports and retrieve that report file. To retrieve a file, we're going to start once again in the My Reports tab. But this time, we're going to go to the File Maintenance subtab. And this is where all of your individual report files are housed. Under this, select a file type dropdown, we'll choose scheduled report files because, as the option suggests, we are looking for a file that was generated from a scheduled report. And this will open up a list of all the individual files generated from your scheduled reports. So here you're going to look for your report name and the run date that you chose. Our demo report has not run yet. You won't see it in the list, but I've got a couple others here I can select from. And then to download, all you need to do is just click on the file name, and then it will automatically download as an Excel file. So that's how you save and schedule and retrieve a report. I would say, like, if you don't retrieve reports regularly, just remembering to go under file maintenance is probably going to be the most annoying thing, the most annoying part of this. Otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward process. Okay, so that wraps up what I have to show you today on statistical reports. So my hope is that you now have a baseline knowledge of how to build and focus a statistical report, that you have an understanding also of what kind of information that you're able to get from these Simply Report stat reports, and that you know how to save, schedule, and retrieve a stat report file. Um, we do have a training version of Simply Reports that you can absolutely use to play around in. Um, but I did want to mention that if you're using our training Simply Reports, just keep in mind the data in our training database is from January 10th. So it's not going to have any activity from the 11th through today. So if you wanted to go in there to just kind of practice and build, make sure your dates are looking at before January 10th. And then again, if you find you do not have yet permissions, let me go forward, to access statistical reports in our training or production environment, or if you have any questions related to reports, please don't hesitate to reach out to help@ccslib.org, open a help desk ticket, we can get you set up. So I'm going to email you a link to this recording when it's available. I will resend out the slides and the handout too, so you have those like report prompts to practice with. I am going to stick around in case you have any questions. Oh, thanks for joining. I'm also going to stop the recording.